I'd been married to my husband, Alex, for 5 years when he surprised me with a weekend getaway to the city. We stayed at the Omni Hotel in downtown Atlanta, where we used to go on dates before we got serious. My mother-in-law, Karen, dropped us off at the airport on Friday morning, and I spent the whole plane ride trying not to think about how my husband had been acting distant lately. We took a walk along the Beltline on Saturday afternoon, and I caught him checking his phone while I was distracted by a street performer. He claimed it was just work stuff, but I noticed he'd been doing that a lot lately. We went to the Varsity for dinner, where we used to take our friends before a Braves game. I ordered my usual chili dog, but he just got a salad. When we got back to the hotel, I saw that he'd booked a room next door to his mistress, Emily, who was in town from Alabama for some baby shower or something. I was already planning my escape when he dropped the bombshell. The baby wasn't even his. As I walked back to the hotel with Alex, he mentioned that Emily's baby shower was being held at a boutique called Blissful Beginnings in Buckhead. He said they had already sent over a few gifts, and I should just sign the card and get them a nice one to match. But when we got to the room, I noticed there was no gift from my mother-in-law, Karen, like she always does for big milestones. I asked Alex if she'd sent anything, and he said maybe it had gotten lost in the mail. He seemed really nervous, so I let it go. But then I saw the card Emily had left on the bedside table, and it was addressed to Alex and baby Emily. That's when my heart started racing. I started keeping a list of the gifts I'd sent to Emily's baby shower at Blissful Beginnings Boutique in Buckhead. At first, it was just a few small items, a onesie from Gap, a set of baby blocks from Learning Express, and a baby blanket from Pottery Barn Kids. But as I kept checking the online registry, I noticed that several of the gifts I'd purchased for Emily's baby were identical to ones I'd already bought for my own daughter's nursery. I had not changed the names on them, I'd simply switched out the tags and put them in Emily's gift basket. I felt a growing sense of unease as I realized how many gifts I'd been secretly substituting. I started paying closer attention to Alex's phone calls, noticing that he'd been speaking with Emily for long stretches each evening. I overheard him saying something about a favor she needed help with, but he quickly hung up when I approached the room. I tried calling Emily from my own phone, but she didn't answer. I sent her a text message, asking about the baby shower, and she responded with a brief congratulations and a photo of the baby's onesie. The next day, I received a package in the mail addressed to Alex, containing a small gift for the baby. The card inside was signed, "Love, Emily," but the handwriting looked eerily similar to my own. I started to suspect that Emily might be more involved in this situation than I'd initially thought. I decided to do some research, looking up the boutique where the baby shower was being held. Blissful Beginnings had an A+ rating on Yelp, but one reviewer mentioned a suspicious employee who always seemed to be watching the store's customers. I decided to pay a visit to the boutique myself, trying to blend in as I browsed the aisles. The employee I'd read about was indeed working behind the counter, eyeing me with an unnervingly intense gaze. I made a mental note to ask my friend Sarah, who worked at a competing boutique, if she knew anything about Blissful Beginnings' reputation. I scanned the registry again, and that's when I saw it. Every single gift I'd given to Emily was listed as having been purchased from the same store where my husband had met her, Blissful Beginnings in Buckhead, on the exact same day 20 years ago. I stood in the dimly lit store, surrounded by the soft glow of baby shower decorations and the faint hum of hushed conversations. The employee who had been eyeing me earlier was still watching me from behind the counter. I made my way to the back of the store, where I found a small office with a single chair in front of a desk. On the wall opposite the desk was a framed photo, and it was the same one I'd seen on Emily's bedside table at the hotel, a group shot of Emily, Alex, and what looked like Emily's baby. But now I noticed something I hadn't seen before. My husband was holding the baby, and his arm was wrapped around Emily's waist. The photo was taken 20 years ago, on the same day Alex had claimed to have bought gifts for Emily's baby shower at Blissful Beginnings. I remembered now that Emily had mentioned she'd flown in from Alabama for the shower, but I hadn't believed her. She wasn't even pregnant then, or so I thought. As I gazed at the photo, a cold realization crept over me. Alex and Emily were not just having an affair, they had been together long before he married me. The gifts, the baby shower, it was all a charade to keep their relationship under wraps. My husband had been living a lie with my best friend, and I was the only one who had unknowingly played along, signing cards and buying gifts in her name. The truth hit me like a slap in the face. Everything I thought I knew about Alex, our marriage, and our friends was a lie. I walked into the police station, shaking but trying to keep my composure. I told the officer everything about Alex's affair with Emily, the fake gifts, and the baby shower. They listened attentively, asking questions to clarify the details. The officer explained that they would need to investigate further, but they took my statement seriously. I waited for what felt like an eternity before the detective called me in to fill out a formal report. It was a surreal experience, reliving the moments I'd spent agonizing over the gifts and trying to piece together the truth. As I left the station, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a sense of vindication. but also a glimmer of hope I had finally taken control of my own narrative. I walked back to the hotel, where I found Alex and Emily packing up their things. They left soon after without a word. The next morning, I received a call from the detective. They had found evidence of the affair and were charging Alex with bigamy and identity theft. I've been married to my husband, Alex, for 5 years, and we're getting ready to move into our dream home. Or at least, that's what I thought. The realtor showed us the house last week, and we fell in love with its 3-car garage and big backyard. The neighborhood is quiet, with a mix of young families and retired couples. We were going to make an offer on the house by the end of the weekend. But then yesterday, I received a strange package at the office where I work. It was a gift box from Tiffany's, and inside was a beautiful silver picture frame with a note that said, "Congratulations on your new home." The thing is, I don't know anyone who would give me such an expensive gift, and I certainly didn't expect it from someone who wasn't even on my wedding guest list. I'm starting to get a little uneasy about this whole situation. My husband has been acting weird lately, but I thought it was just stress about the move. Now I'm not so sure. He's been getting mysterious calls on his phone, and he's been disappearing for hours at a time without telling me where he's going. And there's something else. Something that's been nagging at me since I saw the picture frame. As I was sipping my morning coffee at the Starbucks on Main Street, I checked my phone and saw an email from a shipping company, UPS. They were sending me a package to the office where I work, with a delivery date of yesterday. I didn't order anything online, but the tracking number led me to a receipt from a local Best Buy store for a 20-year-old TV that was sold to my husband's name. The purchase date was 3 weeks ago, and it had been delivered to his address in another part of town, not ours. I tried to brush it off as a simple mistake, but something about it didn't feel right. I started thinking about our conversations about the move, and how he kept getting mysterious calls on his phone during dinner. Now I was beginning to wonder if those were business calls or something more. The thought sent a shiver down my spine as I looked at the receipt again, this time noticing the exact date and time of the purchase, 7:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. I started to feel a creeping sense of unease as I stared at the receipt from Best Buy. It was just a 20-year-old TV, but something about the way the purchase date and time matched my husband's mysterious calls and disappearing acts was too coincidental to ignore. I tried to brush it off as a simple mistake, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. I decided to investigate further and started keeping a list of all the strange occurrences. I added the TV purchase to the list, along with the Tiffany's gift and my husband's weird behavior. As I continued to dig, I discovered that Alex had been making some unexpected purchases on his credit card. A $500 deposit at a storage facility in another part of town, a $200 online payment to a company called Home Security Pros, and a $300 transfer to a bank account in my name but with a different address listed. I tried to contact the bank to get more information, but they told me it was a private transaction and couldn't disclose any details. I started to feel a knot in my stomach as I pieced together these seemingly unrelated events. It was as if Alex was leading a double life, and I was starting to uncover evidence of it. I decided to take a closer look at our home's property records and discovered that the title to our house is actually held by an LLC with Alex's name on it, not just my name, as we had assumed. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized that I may have unknowingly married into a web of deceit. The TV purchase, the gift, the mysterious calls, it all started to make sense in a terrible way. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, but I was starting to feel like I was walking into a nightmare from which I might never wake up. As I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the list of strange occurrences, I noticed that one of the dates on the receipt matched a phone call Alex made to a number I didn't recognize. I searched our shared online calendar, but all the entries for the past month were deleted. The only event listed was meeting at my place on the day the Tiffany's gift arrived, but there's no one else on the guest list with a name. As I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the list of strange occurrences, something clicked into place. The receipt from Best Buy, the mysterious calls on Alex's phone, the Tiffany's gift, it all made sense now. The TV purchase was not just a simple mistake, it was a deliberate attempt to cover his tracks. I remembered the date and time of the purchase, 7:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The same night he had been making those mysterious calls. The same night he had been disappearing for hours without telling me where he was going. I got up from my chair and walked over to the bookshelf, pulling out the photo album that contained pictures of our wedding day. As I flipped through the pages, one particular picture caught my eye. It was a shot of Alex standing in front of a house, smiling and holding a real estate sign. The house looked familiar. It was the same house we had visited a week ago, the one with the 3-car garage and big backyard. But what really stood out was the look on Alex's face. He was beaming with pride, but his eyes seemed nervous. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this picture was not just a happy memory, it was a stage photograph. Alex had been using the house for something else entirely, something he didn't want me to know about. I called the police, and they arrived at our house within the hour. They took Alex away, and I was left to process everything. The realtor we had been working with revealed that Alex had actually owned the house we visited a week ago. Not us. He had been using it as a secret storage facility for his own business ventures. The Tiffany's gift was just one of many attempts to cover his tracks. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and relief that I had finally uncovered the truth. But as I walked through our empty house, I realized that this was a chance for me to start over. I had unknowingly married into a web of deceit, but I wasn't a victim. I was strong enough to walk away. The police investigation found evidence of Alex's financial crimes, and he was charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. He lost everything: our home, his business, and his freedoms. As I looked through the photo album again, I smiled when I saw the picture of Alex standing in front of the house. His eyes still looked nervous, but now I knew why. It was a reminder that I had finally found the truth, and I was one step closer to healing. I grew up in the small town of Oakdale, where everyone knew each other's names and the diner served the same menu since I was a kid. My family still lives there, and I visit my mom and dad every few months. They always ask about my job and my life in the city, but they don't really get it. My boyfriend, Alex, is from Oakdale too, and he's always saying how small town life is so much simpler than ours. We like to go back for the summer festivals and the Friday night football games, where we can still see our friends from high school. I've noticed that some of the older residents seem off. They'll say something that's not quite right or stare at us for a little too long. But I brushed it off as just old folks being quirky. My dad works at the local hardware store, and he always recommends the best brand of paint for my mom's gardening projects. He's been acting really strange lately, though, locking himself in the back office for hours and muttering to himself through the phone. I've never seen him like this before. And then there's the rumor going around that our entire town is being used as some kind of social experiment. I thought it was just a wild conspiracy theory, but now I'm not so sure. I've been noticing strange people lurking around town, taking notes and watching us. And my dad's behavior just keeps getting weirder. I should have kept paying attention. I was browsing through my mom's gardening journal, looking for some advice on pruning the roses, when I stumbled upon a page with a handwritten note from my dad's handwriting. It said, "Meet me at the old oak tree at 7:45 p.m. on Wednesday, come alone." The date was scribbled in a code I'd never seen before, just a bunch of numbers and letters that looked like a mix of a password and a cipher. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I wondered what he could be up to. I remembered how he's been acting strange lately, locking himself in the back office for hours and muttering to himself on the phone. And now this mysterious note. With no explanation or context, I tried calling him at the hardware store, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I looked out the window and saw a car parked outside. It was a silver sedan with a faded bumper sticker from the Oakdale High School football team. It was the same model as Alex's mom's car. I felt a creeping sense of unease as I wondered if there was more going on in our little town than I was letting myself think. I started looking for inconsistencies in our town's records. I checked the birth certificates at the local courthouse and found that one of my childhood friends, Emily, had been born 2 years earlier than her parents' marriage certificate. I thought it was a minor mistake, but then I noticed that several other families had similar discrepancies. I started keeping a list of these anomalies. I dug through old yearbooks and found that some students were missing from photos that were supposed to be class portraits. I even discovered that our town's official website listed a different population count than the U.S. Census Bureau's. My dad was acting strange, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was involved in something bigger. I decided to investigate further by talking to some of the older residents. I went to the diner and sat next to Mrs. Jenkins, who had been my neighbor growing up. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her napkin as we talked about the weather. When I brought up the topic of the town's experiment, she quickly excused herself to go to the bathroom. I watched as she went into the back room and emerged a few minutes later, looking pale. She muttered something about needing to get home and left in a hurry. I was starting to get suspicious, but I needed more evidence. I started taking photos of the town's license plates and noticing that some of them had different state stickers than others. I even spotted a car with a vanity plate that read, OAK Delon. I couldn't help but wonder if this was some kind of code. I decided to pay a visit to the local library, where I met a librarian named Karen who seemed knowledgeable about the town's history. She told me about a series of lawsuits filed against the town in the 1990s, which were all settled out of court. When I asked her about the experiment, she leaned in close and whispered, "I don't know what's going on, but I've seen some strange things happening around here." She quickly returned to shelving books, leaving me with more questions than answers. As I left the library, I noticed a silver sedan parked outside, the same model as Alex's mom's car. It was the same one I had seen parked outside my house a few days ago. Suddenly, everything started to click into place. I checked the security cameras and found footage of myself from 10 years ago, walking through the same streets, but with a different car and a haircut I'd never had before. The timestamp on the footage was from this morning, and the image quality was so clear it looked like I was standing right in front of me. I stared at the security footage of myself from 10 years ago, walking through the same streets, but with a different car and a haircut I'd never had before. The timestamp on the footage was from this morning, and the image quality was so clear it looked like I was standing right in front of me. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. I remembered the strange notes my dad used to write to himself, the coded dates and letters that seemed like a mix of a password and a cipher. I recalled the silver sedan with the faded bumper sticker from Oakdale High School football team, parked outside my house and outside the library. It was the same car, and I knew its connection now. I thought back to the lawsuits filed against the town in the 1990s, settled out of court. My dad had been acting strange, locking himself in the back office for hours and muttering to himself on the phone. I realized he wasn't just working on a project, he was part of it. Our entire town is an experimental sociological test, with every resident a trained actor. My dad's job at the hardware store was not what it seemed. He was one of the handlers, managing the experiment and keeping everything under control. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me as I realized my family had been living in a lie for so long. I called the authorities, and they took my dad into custody for his role in the experiment. As it turned out, the town's records were falsified to conceal the true nature of the test. The residents were indeed actors, trained to react in specific ways to certain stimuli. My dad's job at the hardware store was a front, and he was one of the handlers, responsible for managing the experiment. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, but also a sense of relief that the truth was finally out. The authorities promised to investigate further and hold those responsible accountable. I decided to leave Oakdale to start fresh in a place where my life wouldn't be scripted. As I packed my bags, I couldn't help but think of Mrs. Jenkins, who had been my neighbor growing up. I wondered if she was an actor too, or if she had been playing a role all along. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I pushed it aside and focused on the future. I used to be married to Alex, a 25-year-old software engineer with a bright smile and a bad temper. We lived in a small house on Elm Street, just a block away from the 7-Eleven where we'd buy coffee every morning. He drove a black 2015 BMW M3, which he'd always been proud of, but now sat parked on our front lawn with a for sale sign on it. The day after I caught him using my credit card to buy a new TV without my permission, he sold the car to a guy named Ryan who showed up an hour later and used the money to fund my divorce attorney. I still don't know how he managed to buy the house without me noticing. He's been sending me cryptic messages on social media since then, claiming he's moved on and can't wait to meet my new partner. Our friends have been divided between him and me, with some calling him a cheater and others saying I'm overreacting. It's been 3 months now, and I've finally started to get my life back on track. But the other day, when I went to check the mailbox, I found a letter from his new attorney, threatening to sue me for unfairly accusing him of infidelity. I tried to brush it off, but something about the tone made my skin crawl. And then I remembered the strange voicemail he left on my phone last week, whispering something about taking care of me and not being alone anymore. I was sorting through my mail when I found a letter from the law office of Johnson & Associates, dated yesterday's date. They claimed to be representing Alex in his dispute with me over the divorce. But what caught my attention was the return address on the envelope. It was the 7-Eleven where we used to buy coffee every morning. I remembered Alex always joked about how he knew the owner, Mike, personally. This letter was addressed to me at our old Elm Street house, but it had a new return address label applied over the old one, with the new address matching the one Alex gave to his new lawyer. The lawyer's signature was familiar. It was Alex's friend from college, Ryan, who bought the BMW M3. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized this was not just about the divorce, but something more. As I stood in my living room, staring at the letter from Alex's new attorney, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The return address on the envelope seemed too familiar. It was the 7-Eleven where we used to buy coffee every morning. I remembered Alex always joked about how he knew the owner, Mike, personally. This letter was addressed to me at our old Elm Street house, but it had a new return address label applied over the old one, with the new address matching the one Alex gave to his new lawyer. The lawyer's signature was familiar. It was Alex's friend from college, Ryan, who bought the BMW M3. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized this was not just about the divorce, but something more. I started keeping a list of all the strange occurrences that had been happening since Alex left. The day after I caught him using my credit card, he sold the sports car and used the money to fund my divorce attorney. He's been sending me cryptic messages on social media, claiming he's moved on and can't wait to meet my new partner. Our friends have been divided between him and me, with some calling him a cheater and others saying I'm overreacting. I went back to the letter and examined it more closely. The paper was a different brand than the one Alex usually used, and the way the words were typed out, it seemed almost mechanical. I remembered a phrase from one of Alex's social media posts, taking care of me. I had brushed it off as a joke, but now it sounded ominous. I started to wonder if Alex was trying to manipulate me, or worse. I decided to dig deeper and started searching online for any information about the law office of Johnson & Associates. The website was sleek and modern, with a logo that seemed eerily familiar. I did a quick search on my phone and discovered that they were a small firm specializing in family law cases. But what caught my attention was the name of one of their lawyers, Emily Wilson. I was sure I had seen that name before. I stared at the computer screen, my eyes fixed on the website of Johnson & Associates. Emily Wilson, the lawyer listed as Alex's representative, was an exact match for my high school classmate, Emily Wilson, the same person I had a crush on in 10th grade. I stared at the computer screen, my eyes fixed on the website of Johnson & Associates. Emily Wilson, the lawyer listed as Alex's representative, was an exact match for my high school classmate, Emily Wilson, the same person I had a crush on in 10th grade. A wave of memories washed over me, Emily's bright smile, her infectious laugh, and our late-night conversations about our dreams. But what stood out was the way she always made me feel seen and heard. I remembered how she'd often drive me home from school when my parents were out, and we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. It all came flooding back, the sleepovers, the shared secrets, and the whispered promises to stay in touch. But as I delved deeper into Emily's profile, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. She had been a key witness in Alex's college assault case, and had written a passionate letter to the court in his defense. The same words kept repeating in my mind, "I didn't mean it," and "changed after that." The 7-11 return address label now made sense. Emily must have been the one who helped Alex cover his tracks, and Ryan was just a pawn in their game. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that Alex had been using me all along, manipulating me, playing on my trust, and using our shared past to control me. I stood in my living room, the letter from Alex's new attorney still clutched in my hand, and felt a wave of relief wash over me as I realized that the truth was finally out. The authorities were notified, and Alex's friend Ryan was arrested for his involvement in the cover-up. As I went through the motions of testifying against Alex in court, I couldn't help but think about Emily Wilson, the high school classmate who had been a key witness in Alex's college assault case. Her words kept echoing in my mind, "He didn't mean it," and "changed after that." But this time, I saw them for what they were, lies. The court eventually ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of our assets in the house. As I packed up my belongings to move out, I received a message from Emily, apologizing for her role in Alex's scheme and wishing me well. I didn't respond, but instead focused on rebuilding my life. I found solace in reconnecting with old friends and starting a new hobby, painting. It wasn't easy, but I learned to see the beauty in the darkness and to find peace in the knowledge that justice had been served. I'm still trying to process how my ex's new partner, Rachel, managed to worm her way into our circle of friends. We met at my mom's annual summer BBQ, and I couldn't believe it when she told me she was engaged to the daughter of my mom's best friend, Karen. I tried to be supportive, but Rachel would often make snide comments about me on social media, and I had to block her. My mom, being the eternal optimist, thought we should just get along, and that it was all in the past. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that Rachel was somehow connected to my own life. My car, a 2015 Honda Civic, has been making a weird noise for months, and I finally took it to the Honda dealership last week to get it checked out. They said it was a minor issue, but it cost me an extra $100 to fix. Anyway, that's where things stood until yesterday, when Rachel showed up at my mom's doorstep, looking frantic and begging to talk to her. I was making breakfast in my kitchen when I noticed Rachel's fiancé Alex sitting at the small cafe down the street from my apartment complex. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. And I had just brewed a fresh pot of coffee from a bag of Starbucks whole beans I had bought that morning. I wasn't sure what he was doing there, but something about it didn't sit right with me. I tried to brush it off as coincidence, but my mind started racing with possibilities. I finished making my breakfast, but my appetite had vanished. As I ate in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that Alex's presence was more than just a coincidence. I remembered that he worked at a graphic design firm in downtown Minneapolis, and I wondered if he might have been in the area for a meeting or project. But why would he be sitting outside my apartment building? I tried to shake off the feeling that Alex's presence was more than just a coincidence, but it lingered long after I finished my breakfast. I started keeping a list of the strange occurrences involving Rachel and her fiancé. First, there was the weird noise in my car, which I finally took to the Honda dealership last week to get checked out. They said it was a minor issue, but it cost me an extra $100 to fix. That same day, I noticed that Alex had been sitting at the small cafe down the street from my apartment complex. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, and I had just brewed a fresh pot of coffee from a bag of Starbucks whole beans I had bought that morning. I remembered that he worked at a graphic design firm in downtown Minneapolis, but what was he doing outside my building? The next day, Rachel showed up at my mom's doorstep, looking frantic and begging to talk to her. I couldn't help but wonder if Alex was somehow involved in their argument. I decided to look into it further and started researching online. According to public records, Rachel had changed her address just a few weeks ago, and it matched the same complex where my mom's best friend, Karen, lived. I called Karen to ask about Rachel's sudden move, but she claimed she knew nothing about it. When I asked if she had any idea why Alex would be hanging out around my building, she said that he was probably just running errands for his mother. But something about her tone didn't quite add up. As I continued to investigate, I discovered that Alex's graphic design firm had a project due soon, and they were working with several clients in the downtown area. It seemed unlikely that he would be taking a morning off to sit outside my building, unless it was related to Rachel somehow. I started to notice other strange coincidences. The same day Alex was spotted, I received an email from a local coffee shop offering me a free refill on my loyalty card. The email was sent by a user with the same username as Rachel's social media account. I stared at the license plate on Rachel's fiancée's car, parked outside my building. It matched the one on Karen's driveway, where my mom had taken a photo of Alex's car visiting just last week. Suddenly, I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the unthinkable: my mom's best friend's son was the same person I'd been seeing everywhere. As I stared at the license plate on Rachel's fiancée's car, parked outside my building, something clicked into place. The same plate matched the one on Karen's driveway, where my mom had taken a photo of Alex's car visiting just last week. I remembered that strange noise in my car, which I finally took to the Honda dealership last week to get checked out. They said it was a minor issue, but it cost me an extra $100 to fix. It was then that I saw a faint scratch on the side of Alex's car, the same one that matched the scratch on my own 2015 Honda Civic. I recalled the email from a local coffee shop offering me a free refill on my loyalty card, sent by a user with the same username as Rachel's social media account. It all made sense now. Alex wasn't just any ordinary graphic designer. He was Rachel's accomplice, and their plan had been to use me to get to my mom's best friend, Karen. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that Rachel's frantic visit to my mom's doorstep was a distraction, meant to keep me busy while Alex siphoned off information from Karen's household. The coffee shop email was just a red herring, meant to throw me off the scent. My eyes landed on the license plate again, and I knew I had finally uncovered the truth. Rachel and Alex were in cahoots with my mom's best friend's family, using our connections to get what they wanted. I took a deep breath and dialed the police department's non-emergency number, reporting the suspicious behavior of Rachel and Alex. I told them about the strange coincidences, the email from the coffee shops, and the matching license plate on Alex's car. They thanked me for the information and promised to look into it. The next day, I received a call from my mom's best friend, Karen. She apologized for not telling me about her son's involvement with Rachel and Alex. It turned out that Karen had been aware of their scheme all along, but had been too afraid to speak up. She explained that she had been trying to protect her family's reputation, but in doing so, she had inadvertently put me in harm's way. I listened calmly, trying to process the weight of her words. As we talked, I realized that my mom's best friend had been struggling with her own guilt and shame for keeping this secret. I decided to forgive Karen and offer to help her family get the support they needed. In the end, Rachel and Alex were charged with identity theft and conspiracy, and they lost their jobs at the graphic design firms. My mom's best friend's family was able to heal and rebuild their relationships, and I finally felt a sense of closure and peace. I'm Rachel, a 28-year-old event planner, and I was supposed to be the happiest bride in the world on that sunny Saturday afternoon in June. My fiancé, Alex, and I had spent years saving for our dream wedding, and our friends and family had been planning the perfect garden reception at the luxurious Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. As I began my speech to thank everyone for coming, my best man's wife, Karen, stood up and started sipping her champagne with an air of self-importance that made me roll my eyes. But then she dropped a bombshell. She had secretly recorded every conversation she'd ever had with me over the past year on her phone. I own a 2015 Toyota Prius hybrid, which I've lovingly named Bertha, and I'm still paying off the loan on it from Bank of America. Alex has always joked that I'm like a little girl with my habits, but I like to think I'm just practical. As I stood there in my white wedding dress, trying not to show how annoyed I was getting, I noticed that Karen's eyes kept darting towards me, and I wondered what she was hiding. We've known the Petersons, our next-door neighbors, for a few years now. They're an older couple who always lend us their garden hose or borrow our lawnmower when they need it. I've always thought of them as kind of like grandparents to me. As I gazed out at our 40 guests, laughing and chatting in the warm sunlight, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt for what was about to happen next. As I stood at the microphone, smiling and trying to thank our guests for coming, Karen's voice cut through the applause. She mentioned something about needing to set the record straight and clear the air. At first, I thought it was just her usual drama, but then she took a sip of her champagne and said, "I've been keeping a record of our conversations, Rachel, and I think you should hear what I have to say." My heart started racing as I glanced at Alex, who looked like he was about to intervene. Karen's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The DJ playing in the background suddenly seemed too loud, and I noticed that Karen's champagne glass was a specific brand, a 2018 edition of Moncton Chandon, which I had seen her buying at the Total Wine store on our last visit to LA. The more she spoke, the more I felt my skin crawl. As I stood at the microphone, trying to regain my composure after Karen's bombshell, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The DJ seemed to be playing a little too loudly, and I noticed that Karen's champagne glass was a specific brand, a 2018 edition of Moncton Chandon, which I had seen her buying at the Total Wine store on our last visit to LA. I made a mental note to check my phone records for any suspicious calls or texts from Karen. I glanced around the garden, taking in the smiling faces of our friends and family. But my eyes landed on something that made my heart skip a beat. Alex's wallet was lying on the table next to his chair, open and empty. I distinctly remembered him putting it in his pocket earlier that morning. I tried to brush it off as a harmless mistake, but a nagging voice in my head kept whispering that something wasn't quite right. I started taking note of the small details that didn't add up: Karen's behavior, the brand of champagne she was drinking, Alex's missing wallet. I began to feel like I was trapped in some kind of twisted game, and I had no idea what the rules were. I excused myself from the microphone and made my way over to Alex, trying to subtly ask him if everything was okay. As we stood off to the side, Alex brushed it off as just a silly mistake, but I could see the faintest glimmer of unease in his eyes. I decided then and there that I would start keeping a list of all the discrepancies I noticed. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note titled Suspicious Incidents. The first entry read, Alex's wallet missing from table. I added a second entry. Karen's champagne is a specific brand, same as one she bought at Total Wine. I looked around the garden, taking in the happy chatter and laughter. But my eyes kept drifting back to Karen, who was now chatting with our friends like nothing was amiss. I started to wonder if she was trying to distract us from something or someone. As I scanned the room, I noticed Alex's phone on the reception desk. Ringing with a number that seemed familiar, it was the same number he'd given me as his emergency contact when we first started dating. As I stood in stunned silence, Alex's phone on the reception desk continued to ring with the familiar number I'd given him as his emergency contact. I felt like I was in a dream, watching myself react to a situation that couldn't possibly be happening. And then it hit me, the truth. The number on the phone wasn't just any number. It was the same number Alex had used to secretly communicate with Karen throughout our entire relationship. He had been planning this all along, and I was just a pawn in his game. The champagne Karen had been drinking, Moncton Chandon, 2018 edition, which she'd bought at Total Wine in LA. I remembered seeing her receipt from that exact store on my phone when Alex and I were on a trip to LA. It was one of the few times we'd gone on a trip without me suspecting anything, but now it made sense. The Petersons' kindness, always lending us their garden hose or borrowing our lawnmower, they had been in on it too, providing cover for Alex's secret meetings with Karen. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, reliving all the moments that should have raised red flags but didn't. The missing wallet, the suspicious phone calls, the cryptic messages, it was all part of Alex's plan to keep Karen close and me in the dark. I calmly walked over to the reception desk, picked up Alex's phone, and ended the call. The room fell silent as everyone turned to me, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. I took a deep breath, looked Alex straight in the eye, and said, "It's over." The police arrived soon after, and we spent the next few hours at the station, answering questions and reviewing the evidence. The investigation revealed that Alex had been manipulating Karen from the beginning, using her as a pawn in his game of deception. The Petersons were charged with aiding and abetting, and Alex was sentenced to 5 years in prison for grand larceny and emotional manipulation. As I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and memories of our life together, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I realized that I had been living in a dream, and it was time to wake up. I took a moment to reflect on the little things I had noticed along the way: Karen's champagne glass, Alex's missing wallet, the suspicious phone calls, and how they had all added up to a much larger truth. And as I looked out the window at the sunshine, I knew that I was finally free. So note the length of this output is 171 words. I work as a curator at the Riverbend Art Gallery, which is funded by the donations of wealthy patrons. One of our largest donors is the Harrington Group, led by the enigmatic billionaire Julian Harrington. His family's business empire spans several continents, and their philanthropic efforts have earned them countless accolades. I've had the pleasure of attending several of their charity events, where Julian would often regale us with stories of his adventures in international trade. But I've also noticed that their involvement in our local arts scene seems coordinated, like they're trying to shape the cultural narrative in some way. Last week, I saw Julian at the gallery, meeting with our director to discuss a new exhibit. He seemed particularly interested in one piece, a sculpture by a local artist that explores the theme of globalization. I made a mental note to research his business dealings, but Julian's reputation is squeaky clean. Still, something about his smile struck me as off. I was reviewing the gallery's finances last Thursday evening, sipping on a cappuccino from Starbucks, when I noticed a peculiar transaction in our records. The Harrington Group had made a large donation to our organization, but it was flagged as corporate sponsorship, rather than a personal gift. I double-checked the paperwork and confirmed that it was indeed signed by Julian Harrington himself. What caught my attention, however, was the payment method: a wire transfer from a Chase bank account in Istanbul. I didn't think much of it at first, but something about the timing and the specificity of the details made me uneasy. It was 8:47 p.m. on that Thursday night when I jotted down a note to look into this further, and I remember thinking it was an odd hour for a business transaction. The Harrington Group's logo on our donation page now seemed like more than just a logo, it felt like a warning sign. I spent the weekend poring over our gallery's donation records, searching for any connection between the Harrington Group and the wire transfer from Istanbul. On Sunday evening, I discovered that Julian Harrington's company, Harrington Industries, had filed a patent application in Turkey for a new type of arms manufacturing technology. The filing date was only a week ago, and I remembered noticing a similar-sounding patent application on a different website, also filed by Harrington Industries. I started to feel a growing sense of unease as the pieces began to fit together. On Monday morning, I arrived at the gallery to find a package waiting for me in my office. It contained a small notebook with a handwritten note that read, "For your eyes only." The notebook itself was a high-end brand, one that I had never seen before. As I flipped through its empty pages, I noticed that the binding was slightly loose, as if someone had recently opened it. I decided to investigate further and began by searching online for any information about the patent application. After an hour of browsing, I came across a news article from a Turkish newspaper that mentioned Harrington Industries' involvement in a major arms deal with the Turkish government. The article included a quote from Julian Harrington himself, praising the deal as a historic moment for his company. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read the article. Something wasn't adding up. I remembered the wire transfer from Istanbul and how it had been flagged as a corporate sponsorship rather than a personal gift. Suddenly, the Harrington Group's logo on our donation page seemed like more than just a logo, it felt like a warning sign. As I continued to research, I stumbled upon a website that claimed to expose corrupt business practices around the world. On their whistleblower page, I found a cryptic message that read, "Look for the Istanbul connection." I had no idea what it meant, but I was determined to find out. I started keeping a list of all the suspicious transactions and events that had occurred in relation to the Harrington Group. The list grew as the day went on, with each new entry making me more convinced that something was seriously wrong. I walked into the gallery's storage room, expecting to find a new shipment of art supplies. Instead, I found a crate with no label, sealed with Harrington Group's logo. The air inside was thick with an eerie silence, and the smell of Turkish coffee lingered in the air. My eyes locked onto a single word, scrawled on the wall in red ink: Istanbul. The Harrington Group's logo on our donation page wasn't just a logo, it was a warning sign. I realized that the Istanbul connection wasn't just a vague reference, but a clear indication of their involvement in the arms trade. The patent application they filed in Turkey was for a technology used to manufacture advanced missiles. The wire transfer from Istanbul was a payment made by Harrington Industries to one of their subsidiary companies, which was responsible for shipping these missiles to conflict zones around the world. The notebook with the handwritten note was a message from an anonymous whistleblower who had been tracking Harrington's dealings for years. They had left it for me to find, hoping that I would uncover the truth and expose the Harrington Group's deceitful activities. As I flipped through the notebook, I noticed a photo of Julian Harrington meeting with high-ranking officials in the Turkish government. The date on the photo was from 2 years ago, when he received the International Philanthropist of the Year award at our gallery. The award was a sham, and the photo was a testament to his involvement in the arms trade. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a sense of responsibility for not seeing it sooner. The Harrington Group's donations to our gallery were not acts of kindness, but calculated attempts to buy influence and silence anyone who might expose their crimes. I spent the next few days working closely with law enforcement to gather evidence and build a case against the Harrington Group. We discovered that Julian Harrington's business empire was a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts, designed to launder money and conceal their illicit activities. The Turkish government's involvement was also exposed, and several high-ranking officials were arrested for corruption. As the news broke, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that the truth was finally out, but also sadness for the victims of Harrington's crimes. I remembered the cryptic message on the whistleblower website: "Look for the Istanbul connection." It had been a lifeline, guiding me through the darkest moments of my investigation. The notebook with the handwritten note became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of corruption and deceit, there are always those who will speak truth to power. I made sure to reach out to the whistleblower, to thank them for their courage and bravery. The aftermath was chaotic, but I took comfort in knowing that justice had been served. As I looked around the gallery, now free from Harrington's influence, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The river outside seemed calmer, the sunlight more vibrant. It was a new beginning, one that I was eager to explore.
I've been living with my fiancée Emily in our small 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Denver for 3 years. We love our little routine. Every Saturday morning, we walk our golden retriever Max, at Washington Park, and stop by the original pancake house for a stack of Buttermans. Emily's a graphic designer, and I work as an accountant at Deloitte. She's been getting antsy about meeting my mother-in-law, Karen, who's been estranged from our family since she ran away to Vegas 20 years ago with another man. I've been avoiding bringing it up, but the more Emily talks about how much she wants to meet her grandmother, the more I feel like I'm hiding something from her. Last night, Karen sent us a text asking to meet for coffee at the Starbucks on 16th Street, and I still haven't responded. I'm not sure what's holding me back. Maybe it's the feeling that I'm getting pulled into someone else's drama. I should have kept checking my phone for responses from Karen. I still hadn't responded to Karen's text asking to meet for coffee at the Starbucks on 16th Street, and I was trying to come up with a valid excuse when Emily mentioned that she had seen a post about Karen being a long-lost Vegas girl on a local blog. I tried to change the subject, but Emily was intrigued and started doing some digging online. I noticed she was on her laptop for a lot longer than usual, and I caught a glimpse of a Reddit thread with the title, "Vegas Girl Runs Away from Family Again." My heart sank as I realized that Emily might actually go through with meeting Karen, even without me being there to prep her for the drama that would inevitably ensue. I stared at the text from Karen, my mother-in-law, asking to meet for coffee at the Starbucks on 16th Street. I had been putting it off, but Emily's been getting antsy about meeting her. I couldn't think of a good excuse, so I just hadn't responded. But then Emily mentioned she'd seen a post about Karen being a long-lost Vegas girl on a local blog. She was intrigued and started digging online. I noticed she was on her laptop for a lot longer than usual, and I caught a glimpse of a Reddit thread with the title, "Vegas Girl Runs Away from Family Again." My heart sank as I realized Emily might actually go through with meeting Karen without me being there to prep her for the drama. I started keeping a list of inconsistencies in Karen's story. First, I remembered that Emily had mentioned Karen worked as a cocktail waitress in Vegas. But when I checked online, the only Karen working as a waitress was 20 years older than my fiancée. Then I noticed that our apartment manager, Mr. Lee, always seemed to be taking phone calls from an unknown number around the time Karen sent us texts. He'd always smile and say it was just a wrong number. I decided to do some research on Karen's past. I found an article about a woman who matched her description running away with another man in 2002. The article mentioned that the woman's family had been searching for her ever since. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that Karen might be the same person. I started asking Emily more questions about her childhood, trying to see if she remembered anything about Karen. She mentioned that her mom used to talk about her sister, but never said much else. I asked Emily if she had any photos of Karen from when she was younger, and she handed me an old Polaroid from a family vacation. I looked at the photo, and the woman in it didn't match the one in the article. I decided to pay a visit to the original pancake house, where Emily and I go for breakfast every Saturday. I stared at the old Polaroid, and the woman in it didn't match the one in the article. I turned to Emily and asked if she had any more photos of her aunt from back then. She hesitated before pulling out a small box from under our bed. I stared at the Polaroid in Emily's hand, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The woman in the photo was standing next to a Vegas sign, wearing a tank top and sunglasses, with a faint smile on her face. I remembered the article I had read about a woman running away with another man in 2002. The description matched, and the age matched Karen's. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that my future mother-in-law was actually the Vegas girl who had left her family in shame 20 years ago. I turned to Emily and asked if she remembered anything about Karen's past. She thought for a moment before responding, "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. My mom always said Karen was..." I took the Polaroid from Emily and studied it closer. The woman in the photo looked eerily familiar to me. It was Emily's grandmother, but not as I had imagined her. I thought back to the phone calls Mr. Lee would take around the time Karen sent us texts. It made sense now. He was probably helping Karen keep tabs on us. The original pancake house where we went for breakfast every Saturday suddenly seemed like a trap. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized that Karen had been playing us all along, using her family's history to manipulate Emily and me. The coffee meetups, the texts, it was all just a ruse to get closer to us. I looked at Emily, who was still holding the Polaroid, oblivious to the truth. I knew I had to tell her. But a part of me was scared of what would happen next. I walked Emily out of the Starbucks on 16th Street, trying to process everything we'd just discovered. We had left a message for Karen, but I knew it was unlikely she'd show up. When we got home, I called my best friend Alex, who's an investigative journalist, and asked him to dig deeper into Karen's past. He came over that night with a stack of documents and articles about the Vegas girl who had run away with another man in 2002. It was all there: the name, the description, the photos. I felt a mix of emotions: shock, anger, sadness. But most of all, relief. We'd been played, but at least we knew the truth now. I turned to Emily and took her hand. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," I said. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "We'll get through this together." We hugged, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a sense of peace. We'd faced the truth, and we were stronger for it. I've been running my family's used car dealership, Golden Wheels, in suburban Oakdale for 3 years now. My father's health issues have kept him away from the daily grind, so I'm the one who deals with the day-to-day operations. We've seen better days, but I'm trying to keep things afloat until we can sell the business or figure out a new strategy. Our best salesperson, Dave, is a 20-year veteran of the industry, and still manages to bring in a steady stream of customers. He's been with us since my dad bought the dealership back in 2012, and I've come to trust his instincts implicitly. Last Thursday, he came to me with a peculiar expression and said, "You won't believe what just happened at the Johnsons' house on Elm Street." He hesitated for a moment before launching into the story of how a modified Explorer they'd sold to the Johnsons had blown out its tires on the highway. The Johnsons were livid, but Dave seemed more concerned than usual about the whole thing. I brushed it off as a minor issue, but now I'm not so sure. My wife, Rachel, has been on my case about the dealership's finances for months, and I know she'd kill me if she found out we were selling cars with safety features disabled. I should have kept digging into what Dave was saying. I was reviewing the day's sales figures when Dave walked in with a peculiar expression, holding up his phone with the Johnson's Explorer picture on the screen. "This is what I'm talking about," he said. "The modified Explorer they bought from us last month. It just blew out its tires on the highway." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "The Johnsons are furious. But what really got me was that the Explorer was supposed to have been thoroughly inspected by our mechanic, Joe at Oakdale Auto Repair, before being sold. I know Joe's a great guy and all, but if he missed something like this, I'm starting to wonder how many other cars we've sold with upgrades." I raised an eyebrow, feeling a shiver run down my spine, as I recalled the Johnsons' complaints about the Explorer's strange behavior on the road. The more Dave talked, the more my unease grew. I made a mental note to review the Explorer's maintenance records, and check if Joe had indeed inspected it properly before the sale. Little did I know that this was just the tip of the iceberg. I spent the rest of the day reviewing the Explorer's maintenance records, and found that Joe at Oakdale Auto Repair had indeed inspected it before the sale. But there was a discrepancy in the logbook entry for the vehicle's tire pressure monitoring system, a TPM's update. According to the log, Joe had completed the update, but when I called him to ask about it, he claimed he couldn't have done it that day because he was running late with another job. I made a mental note to review the security footage from Oakdale Auto Repair. The next day, I visited the Johnsons and asked them if they would be willing to let me take a closer look at the Explorer's TPMS system. They agreed, and as we were inspecting it, I noticed that one of the sensors was loose, which could have caused the tire blowout. I took some photos and sent them to Dave, asking him to review our inventory of Explorers with similar modifications. While reviewing our sales records, I discovered that we had sold several Explorers with similar modifications, all within the last 6 months. I started keeping a list of the vehicles and their owners, as well as any unusual behavior reported by customers. I also decided to discreetly review the dealership's financial records, looking for any large transactions or unusual payments. As I was digging through the financials, I noticed a suspicious payment from a company called Midwest Performance Enhancements. I had never heard of them before, but their address seemed to match one of our regular suppliers. I made a note to look into this further. I also decided to set up a hidden camera in the sales office, aimed at the counter where we handle transactions. I wanted to catch any suspicious behavior from our sales staff or customers. That night, I received an email from a customer who had purchased one of our modified Explorers. He mentioned that his vehicle had also experienced a similar tire blowout on the highway, but he hadn't reported it to us because he didn't want to cause a scene. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized how widespread this issue might be. I reviewed the security footage from the sales office. That's when I saw it: Joe, our mechanic, casually strolling in with a laptop and typing away on our company computer, while customers were distracted elsewhere in the dealership. But that wasn't what caught my attention. I finally pieced together the truth about Joe's laptop and the company computer in the sales office. It wasn't just a casual conversation or a misplaced concern about security. The logs showed that every time Joe typed on our computer, it was to log false maintenance records for vehicles that had been modified by Midwest Performance Enhancements. The payments I'd noticed earlier were actually invoices from Joe's own company, which he'd created as a shell to siphon money from our dealership. The Explorers with modified TPMS systems weren't just minor issues. They were part of a larger scheme to quietly disable safety features in high-demand vehicles. The footage showed Joe typing away on our computer, while customers were distracted. But it was more than just an innocent act. He was updating records to cover his tracks, making it seem like the modified vehicles had been properly inspected and sold as is. I felt a wave of anger wash over me as I realized how many customers we'd put at risk. The Johnson's Explorer wasn't an isolated incident, it was just one of many vehicles we'd knowingly sold with compromised safety features. The revelation shook me to my core, and I knew I had to take immediate action to rectify the situation and protect our customers. I called the police, and they sent an investigator to review the dealership's financial records and security footage. It turned out that Joe had been running a massive scheme to siphon money from our dealership through Midwest Performance Enhancements. He was arrested and charged with embezzlement and falsifying records. The Johnsons and several other customers who had purchased modified Explorers filed lawsuits against us. But we cooperated fully with the authorities and worked to make things right. I took a leave of absence to deal with the fallout and eventually resigned as CEO. My wife, Rachel, was instrumental in helping me navigate the aftermath and rebuild our dealership's reputation. We implemented new safety protocols and trained our staff to recognize potential scams. It was a difficult time, but I'm proud of how we handled it. As I reflect on the experience, I realize that I learned to trust my instincts and listen to my concerns, even when they seemed irrational. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve our customers better and to create a safer environment for everyone who walks into Golden Wheels.
I've been living on the small island of Kalani with my husband Alex for almost 6 months now. We faked our own deaths and moved here while he was busy signing papers selling our mansion in Los Angeles, and had no clue. I've always been drawn to the idea of simplicity and living off the grid. We left behind the chaos of city life, where we were constantly stressed about paying off our mortgage and keeping up with the Joneses. Our old Volvo, a 2015 XT90, is still parked in the driveway collecting dust. The day we arrived on Kalani, I had to bribe the local post office clerk to get them to deliver my mail and packages. My parents, who live in Florida, sent us a care package with some of our favorite snacks, a jar of Mrs. Field's cookies, and a 6-pack of LaCroix sparkling water. Alex has been spending most of his time fishing and trying to catch the attention of the local islanders. I'm trying to keep a low profile, but it's hard not to notice when everyone seems to be watching you. We're still waiting for our online bank accounts to be frozen, so we can't access any of our money. It's a weird feeling, like we're living on borrowed time. I just wish he would stop leaving the bedroom window open at night. I was making breakfast in our small kitchen, sipping on a Starbucks cold brew I had ordered online the previous day, when I noticed something off about the mail that had been delivered the day before. There was a package from UPS addressed to me, but with our island's P.O. box number instead of our personal address. I opened it and found a brand new iPad Air, along with a note that said, "Love, Alex." The thing that caught my attention, though, was the return address label on the outside of the box. It was from a store in LA, a Best Buy on Ventura Boulevard, where Alex had never shopped before. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stared at the address, wondering if maybe he had somehow managed to get our package sent to the island without me knowing about it. But why would he do that? And what else might be going on that I don't know about? I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was probably just a mistake, but my mind kept racing with possibilities. I started going through the motions of island life, trying to keep myself busy while Alex was, wherever he was. I spent most of my days helping out at the local farmers markets, where we would trade our homegrown produce for some much-needed cash. One day, while we were packing up our stand, I noticed a woman lingering around our stall. She seemed out of place among the tourists and locals, dressed in business casual attire with a Bluetooth earpiece visible beneath her shoulder-length brown hair. I remembered a similar-looking person from a news article about a Best Buy employee who had been involved in a scandal a few years ago. I wrote down the employee's name, Rachel Kim, in my notebook, along with the specific date and time she had been spotted at our stall. Later that evening, while reviewing the footage from my camera, I noticed a strange package delivered to our P.O. box earlier that day. It was a small box from Amazon addressed to Alex, but the return address label showed it came from a store in LA, a Best Buy on Ventura Boulevard, where Alex had never shopped before. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stared at the address, wondering if maybe he had somehow managed to get our package sent to the island without me knowing about it. The next day, while exploring the island's small town, I stumbled upon a local library with an old computer terminal that allowed me to access public records. I searched for any information on Alex's past, but everything came back blank. No property records, no financial records, nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I started to wonder if maybe our plan to fake our own deaths had been more successful than we thought. I even started to doubt my own sanity, questioning whether the stress of leaving everything behind had finally gotten to me. But then I received a strange phone call from an unknown number. The caller hung up without saying a word, but the sound of Alex's voice echoed in my mind, sending chills down my spine. As I continued to investigate, I noticed that our local bank was trying to contact us about a large withdrawal from our joint account. But we had no money left on that account, as we had moved everything to an offshore bank. I remembered a phrase Alex used once: "When in doubt, follow the money." I started to suspect that he might be involved in some kind of financial scheme, and that our faked deaths were just a cover for his real intentions. I felt like I was getting close to the truth, but every new discovery only raised more questions. What was Alex's plan, and why had he left me behind? I was reviewing the security footage from our island's only convenience store, where I'd gone to pick up some supplies for dinner, when I saw Alex walk in, looking completely out of place among the locals. He was holding a bouquet of flowers and seemed to be arguing with the cashier. As I watched the security footage from the convenience store, my heart sank as Alex walked in, holding a bouquet of flowers and arguing with the cashier. But it was what happened next that made my blood run cold. He handed over a credit card, and the cashier scanned it before handing him a small package. I froze the frame and zoomed in on the credit card. It was our joint Visa card, which we had left in the mansion when we faked our own deaths. But what really caught my attention was the return address label on the package. It was from a Best Buy on Ventura Boulevard, where Alex had never shopped before. And then I remembered the iPad Air he had sent to me, with the same return address label. I felt like I was staring into the abyss as I realized that Alex wasn't just hiding something. He was using our faked deaths as a cover for his own financial scheme. The withdrawal from our joint account, the new credit card purchases, it all made sense now. He had been using our island as a way to launder money, and I was just a pawn in his games. I watched as Alex walked out of the convenience store, the package in hand, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. The man I thought I knew, the man I had trusted with my life, was a master manipulator who had been playing me from the start. I was shaken to my core as I watched Alex walk out of the convenience store, but I knew I had to stay calm and gather more evidence. I contacted the island's authorities, who quickly alerted the mainland police department in Los Angeles. They managed to freeze all of Alex's accounts and track down his accomplices. It turned out that he had been working with a Best Buy employee, Rachel Kim, who had been embezzling money from the company. The two of them had been using our fake deaths as a cover for their scheme, and they had been sending packages to each other's addresses in LA. I was relieved to know that Alex's plan had been foiled, and that he would face justice for his crimes. As I watched him being led away by the authorities, I felt a sense of closure and vindication. I realized that our decision to leave everything behind had been a wise one, and that we had made the right choice in starting anew on this island. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over me as I looked out at the ocean. I taught art history at Harvard when our university president was accused of stealing my slide presentation from last semester's lectures. I had created the slides as a digital archive of my lectures on 19th century European art, using a combination of PowerPoints and images sourced from the Artster database. My laptop is a 20-year-old MacBook Pro, which I had bought from the Apple Store on Newbury Street in Boston. The university president, Dr. Lee, was known for his attention to detail and his disdain for any perceived intellectual laziness, so the accusation that he had plagiarized my work came as a shock to many of my colleagues. We were in the midst of a heated debate about the merits of digital archiving versus traditional note-taking methods, and I had been presenting my approach as a model of efficiency and accuracy. Dr. Lee was scheduled to speak at our department's annual conference next week, and the accusation raised questions about his credibility as a keynote speaker. I tried to brush it off as a minor misunderstanding, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I had seen Dr. Lee in my office last semester, going over some of my slides, but I had assumed he was just looking for clarification on some of the historical references. Now, I wasn't so sure. I should have kept a closer eye on my files. I was browsing through my emails on a Wednesday morning, sipping coffee from a Starbucks cup with the "Fool Your Hustle" design I'd bought at the Harvard Square store the day before, when I saw an email from the Artster database. They had flagged one of my uploaded images as a potential copyright infringement, citing a matching image in a different user's portfolio. The user's account was registered under a pseudonym, but their profile picture showed a familiar face, Dr. Lee, our university president, who had been attending my lectures last semester. I tried to recall if I'd given him permission to use the image or if he'd asked for it specifically, but my memory was hazy. I decided to investigate further and checked the timestamp on the email, which showed it had been sent the previous Friday at 9:04 a.m. from a MacBook Air at the university's computer lab. I started keeping a list of everything that seemed off about Dr. Lee's behavior and the university's response to the plagiarism accusation. I made a spreadsheet on my Google Drive with columns for date, time, location, and details. I had not changed it since the initial incident, but now I was adding new entries every few hours. On Thursday evening, I received an email from the university's IT department, informing me that they had detected unusual login activity on my laptop. They had flagged a login attempt from Dr. Lee's office, which occurred at 10:45 p.m. on Tuesday nights. I checked my laptop's login history and confirmed that the attempt had indeed come from Dr. Lee's username. I decided to investigate further and asked my friend, a computer science major, to help me analyze the login activity. On Friday morning, I received a call from an unknown number. The caller claimed to be a former student of mine, who had been impressed by my lectures on 19th century European art. They asked for a meeting at the university's coffee shop to discuss a potential research project. I agreed, but when I arrived at the coffee shop, the person was nowhere to be found. However, I did notice that the barista, a friendly student named Alex, had been acting strangely all morning. He kept glancing at his phone and seemed nervous whenever I asked him about the weather. I decided to investigate Alex further and asked my colleague, a professor in the psychology department, if she knew anything about him. She told me that Alex had been struggling with anxiety and was known to be prone to nervous habits. I started observing Alex more closely and noticed that he often took long breaks to scroll through his phone during peak hours. On Saturday afternoon, I received an email from the university's procurement office, informing me that they had issued a purchase order for a new laptop computer, which would be delivered to my department within the week. I checked the purchase order details and found that the laptop was being purchased under Dr. Lee's name, using his university credit card. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this must have been how As I scrolled through the login history, I noticed that Dr. Lee's username had accessed my laptop exactly 3 minutes before the email from the Artster database was sent to me, from the same location, our university's computer lab. The timestamp matched the one on the email, and it was sent just 20 minutes after he had attended my lecture in person. As I continued to investigate, I discovered that the suspicious login activity on my laptop was not just a random attempt by Dr. Lee, but rather a carefully orchestrated plan to access my digital archive of lectures. The email from the Artster database, which had flagged one of my uploaded images as a potential copyright infringement, was actually a red herring. I realized that Dr. Lee's true intention was not to plagiarize my work, but to create a convincing narrative of intellectual dishonesty in order to cover his own tracks. The timestamp on the login activity matched the time when Dr. Lee had attended my lecture in person, and the location was indeed our university's computer lab. I remembered how he had asked me to clarify some of the historical references during his visit, and now it made sense. He was trying to familiarize himself with the content of my lectures in order to create a convincing narrative. I felt a chill run down my spine as I scrolled through the login history, seeing the precise timestamps of Dr. Lee's activities. The purchase order for the new laptop, which was delivered to my department under his name, was part of this larger scheme. He had planned to replace my laptop with a new one that he could control remotely, allowing him to access my files without arousing suspicion. The university's investigation confirmed my suspicions, and Dr. Lee was charged with unauthorized access to my laptop and attempting to cover his tracks. I testified in court, and the judge ruled that the new laptop, purchased under Dr. Lee's name, was actually a gift from the university to me, courtesy of the faculty's vote of appreciation for my works. The experience taught me the importance of digital security and the value of vigilance in protecting one's intellectual property. I decided to take a sabbatical to focus on my research and develop new ways to secure my digital archives. As I looked through my files, I noticed that Alex, the barista, had been a regular at my office hours, and his nervous behavior during our previous encounters made sense now. I felt a mix of emotions: relief that the truth had come out, but also sadness. Lee's downfall and the damage he had caused to our academic community. In the end, I realized that my art history lectures were not just about 19th century European art, but about the people who create, teach, and learn from it. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, but I'll start at the beginning. My name is Emily Wilson, and I'm a 32-year-old journalist who's been researching my family's history for years. My grandfather, Henry Wilson, was a collector of sorts. He had an obsession with antique music boxes and spent his entire life scouring the country for rare ones. His estate sale was last year, and I inherited his old study, which included a small, intricately designed music box with a note that read, "For my dearest, A. 1947. I had no idea who Amanda was, but I knew it was worth looking into. I've been digging through old records and family archives, trying to find any mention of her, and the only clue I have is a faded address on the music box, the old summer house in Provincetown, where my family used to spend our summers in the 50s. I've been going through my grandfather's old letters and one of them mentions that he met Amanda at a dance hall in Provincetown back in '47. It's strange, the more I learn about her, the less I know. I feel like I'm getting closer to something, but I'm not sure what. My mother always said my grandfather was a bit of a loner, but he never said much about his past. Now that I think about it, there were always some old trunks in the attic that he kept locked, even when we were kids. I was going through my grandfather's old letters, searching for any mention of Amanda, and I stumbled upon one from 1948. The postmark said Provincetown, and the stationery was from the local pharmacy, Hawthorne's drugstore, where my grandmother used to buy her medication. The letter mentioned a dance at the Provincetown dance hall on Friday night, where he met Amanda for the first time. But what caught my attention was the sentence. "I've been seeing her in secret, Emily." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read it. My grandfather's handwriting was neat and precise, but this letter seemed different. The words were underlined in red ink, which he never used before or since. I wondered if this was more than just a coincidence. I started going through the old Provincetown phone books, looking for any mention of Amanda's last name. The first few years showed nothing, but in 1949, there was a listing for a woman named Amanda Wells, with an address on Commercial Street. I jotted down the address and added it to my list of places to check. The next day, I paid a visit to the Provincetown Historical Society, hoping they might have some records or photos of the old summer house. The curator showed me some old newspaper clippings from the 1940s, including an article about a fire that had ravaged the house in 1948. I remembered my grandfather mentioning that he had to rebuild the place after the fire. I also found a series of old photographs, one of which showed a young woman standing on the porch of the summer house. I couldn't make out her face, but she was wearing a dress that looked like something from the 1940s. I took a picture of the photo with my phone and added it to my research folder. The next day, I decided to visit the Hawthorne's drugstore in Provincetown, where my grandmother used to buy her medication. The store still had the old pharmacy counter, and the owner showed me some old prescription ledgers from the 1940s. One of the entries caught my eye, a prescription for Amanda Wells, filled by my grandfather himself. I made a copy of the page and added it to my notes. I also started going through my grandfather's old letters, looking for any mention of Amanda. In one of the letters, he wrote about meeting her at a dance hall in Provincetown, but I had already read that before. What caught my eye was a sentence that said, "I've been seeing her in secret, Emily." My grandfather's handwriting was neat and precise, but this letter seemed different. The words were underlined in red ink, which he never used before or since. I stared at the old photograph, frozen on my phone screen. The woman on the porch was definitely my grandmother. But it was her expression, a look of pure terror, that sent a chill down my spine. And then I saw a faint, red ink signature in the corner of the photo, identical to the one on the music box note. As I stared at the old photograph on my phone, the woman on the porch seemed to come alive. It was my grandmother, but her expression, a look of pure terror, sent a chill down my spine. And then I saw it, a faint, red ink signature in the corner of the photo, identical to the one on the music box note. I felt a wave of recognition wash over me as I remembered the old letters and prescription ledgers from Hawthorne's drugstore. My grandfather had filled a prescription for Amanda Wells, my grandmother, and had underlined the words, "I've been seeing her in secret, Emily," in red ink. It was then that it clicked. My grandmother wasn't just someone my grandfather met at a dance hall, she was his illicit lover. The summer house fire in 1948, which my grandfather rebuilt after, was no accident, it was a cover-up for their affair. I recalled the old trunks in the attic, locked away even when we were kids, now making sense as a hiding place for evidence of their relationship. My grandmother's address on the music box note matched the listing in the 1949 phone book, and the pharmacy prescriptions were filled by my grandfather. The photograph on the mantel, which I thought was just a family heirloom, was actually Patricia, my grandmother, taken in 1947, the same year she started seeing my grandfather in secret. I remembered my grandfather's letters, always so neat and precise, but that one letter with the underlined sentence stood out as different. It was then that I realized my grandfather wasn't just a collector of music boxes, he was a keeper of secrets. I stood on the porch of the summer house, the wind whispering secrets through the old wooden slats. The music box, now revealed as a symbol of my grandfather's illicit affair with my grandmother, still played its haunting melody. I remembered the look of terror on my grandmother's face in the photograph, and how it mirrored the fear that had haunted me as I unraveled the truth. But as I gazed out at the sea, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My grandfather's secrets were finally laid bare, and my grandmother was receiving the help she needed. I had done what I could to bring justice to our family's past, and now it was time to let go. I took one last look at the summer house, and then turned away, leaving the secrets and memories behind. The music box, now silenced, was the only reminder of a chapter in our family's history that would never be forgotten.